Nigeria pushes for the establishment of a United Nations Youth Agency as 71st session of UN General Assembly ends in New York.
Activities to mark Nigeria's 56th independence anniversary kick off with interdenominational church service in Abuja.
Nigeria today as Christians is be strong and of good courage. Do not be dismayed. God is faithful.
Federal government flags up another graduate youth empowerment scheme in Ogun State.
And on Good Morning Nigeria, rates and implications for the economy.
Now, the Central Bank of Nigeria left its benchmark interest rate unchanged at 14% at its September 2016 meeting. As the central bank governor said, this is to allow the positive effect of the current monetary policy stance and other measures to fully manifest. During the same period, the U.S. Federal Government Reserve left the target range of its federal fund rate unchanged at 0.25% to 0.5% for the sixth time during its September 2016 meeting.
Well, there's quite some contrast there, Rhoda. Now, by retaining the monetary policy rate, that's to say the Nigerian Central Bank now defied pressure from the Finance Minister, Kemi Adeosun, manufacturers as well as other stakeholders who had asked for a reduction of the benchmark interest rate in order to stimulate consumption and spending. Now, the inflation rate hit an 11-year high of 17.6% in August this year, and the economy shrank for the first time in almost 25 years in the second quarter of 2016, and the economy now is officially in recession.
Very true there, Kingsley. The cash reserve ratio of commercial banks was also left on hold at 22.5%. Interest rates in Nigeria averaged of 10.21% from 2007 until 2016, reaching an all-high, of 14% in July 2016 and a record low of 6% in July of 2009.
Well, Roy, as you have indicated, for many years now, the Central Bank of Nigeria monetary policy rate, otherwise known as the benchmark interest rate, has been double-digit. Now, by the time the deposit money banks charge their own lending rates, including administrative charges, to prospective customers, then usually, of course, the rates get higher.
And indeed, apart from, charging high interest rates on loans, the banks themselves also add all manner of charges, which makes the burden of borrowing unbearable. This has made nonsense of government's effort at stimulating the real sector of the economy.
Well, the consequences cannot be far-fetched. Of course, high interest rates usually will lead to high cost of production, with low capacity utilization, and almost invariably staff rationalization, low sales, default and repayment of loans, and ultimately collapse of businesses, as we have seen them in recent times, folding up like an accordion that has stopped playing.
And Nigeria's high interest regime reflects not only on the cost of the capital, but also the cost of doing business in the country, given the state of Nigeria's shrinking economy and weak labor market. Experts say with the current interest rate, it would be difficult to achieve the desired economic growth and motivate indigenous entrepreneurs to create businesses, saying they will not be competitive with their foreign counterparts who, of course, obtain funds from their country at single digits and then come to invest, Kingsley, in our economy.
Well, that's the way it goes. I mean, you just gave an example a moment ago about what the Federal Reserve Bank in the U.S. has done, retaining the rate between 0.25%, that is 1/4 percent, to 0.5%, versus what you get in Nigeria. By the time you add all the rates together, all the charges together, sometimes, borrowers are having to pay nothing less than 30% or 35%. How can businesses thrive in that environment? Now, what is the logic of the interest rate. For whom, is the interest rate set and for what purpose? Finance Minister, as we indicated also, had, tried to put pressure on the CBN through his monetary policy committee to say, look, it's time now for us to lower interest rates. We need to stimulate the economy. We are in a recession. How do you get out of it if you still have high cost of borrowing? These are the issues we'll be taking a look at today in terms of the implications of the high cost of borrowing in the Nigerian economy. My name is Kingsley Osadolo, and I welcome you to today's edition, the first, of course, for the week, and it's on live on the Good Morning Nigeria network service of the Nigerian Television Authority.
All right, and so I am Rhoda Obo, and just as Kingsley indicated earlier, we'll be looking at the high lending rate and, of course, the impact or the implication it has on our economy. We will have our companion segments, our newspaper review, would have sports, we have business and arts and entertainment. But then let's begin first with the news where Lydia Bassi is standing by. Lydia, good morning.
Good morning, Rhoda. Welcome to the news. Activity Independence anniversary has kicked off with an interdenominational church service held at the National Christian Center in Abuja. Vice President Yemi Osinbajo at the occasion urges Nigerians to remain positive that the country has brighter days ahead with the Buhari administration.
To Nigeria today as Christians is be strong and of good courage. Do not be dismayed. God is faithful. He has promised and he will fulfill his promise. Every Nigerian will benefit from the new Nigeria in Jesus' mighty name. I pray for you that the Almighty God will prosper you too personally, that you will be promoted, and that from today you will begin to see God's favor. Your prayers will be answered in the mighty name of the Lord Jesus. The Lord God Almighty saw our nation when he decided that he was going to put in place the leadership that is now in place. This leadership will take us to the new Nigeria in Jesus' mighty name. God bless you. God bless Nigeria.
After attending the 71st session of the United Nations General Assembly in New York, United States, President Muhammadu Buhari has returned to Abuja. State House correspondent Adamu Sambo reports that the president, who had a series of engagements with other world leaders on issues of significant interest to Nigeria during the week-long visit, arrived at Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport at about 5 o'clock Sunday morning. He was received on arrival by his Chief of Staff, Abba Kyari, Minister of FCT Mohammed Musa Bello, Chief of Defense Staff General Abayo Mioloni Shakin, Chief of Army Staff Lieutenant General Tuku Buratai, Chief of Air Staff Air Marshal Sadiq Abubakar, the Inspector General of Police Ibrahim Idris, Acting EFCC Chairman Ibrahim Mago, and other senior government officials. Lagos State Governor Akinwumi Ambode and the Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, Femi Adesina, described the visit as highly beneficial to Nigeria.
We have spent in New York has been very successful and very impactful. And almost in every sector, we're able to make impact on the issues that relate to the development and growth of Nigeria. I actually even want to say that this trip has been so more fruitful for Lagos State because we now have some people that are willing to sign on and bring investment to Lagos State. So I will say that I'm grateful to Mr. President for giving me the opportunity to come alongside with him and also allowing me to get more investment for Lagos State.
Of all trips that the president has gone on, this one has been very, very significant because the issues that were discussed seemed to be Nigerian issues, though it was a global stage. Talk of IDPs, talk of migrants, talk of the Lake Chad Basin Commission. These are all issues that Nigeria had been championing. Suddenly, Nigerian issues became global issues. And therefore, it's not surprising that at the end of the day, Nigeria is going home with over $300 million in aids to the Lake Chad Basin region. It's a good development. There are also promises of aid and help even to internally displaced people in Nigeria.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Geoffrey Onyema, says President Muhammadu Buhari is pushing for the establishment of a United Nations agency dedicated entirely to youths. The president believes this will curb youth unemployment, militancy, restiveness, vandalism, and terrorism globally. The minister said this at a wrap-up meeting with the New York.
To keep the United States, I think, engaged with the eyes still on Nigeria in the area of security, helping with the, as far as the economy is concerned, encouraging U.S. businesses to come and invest in Nigeria, and of course helping us with our anti-corruption drive. And we're hoping also, at least they've shown an interest in selling us some military hardware, subject, of course, to the congressional approval.
Minister of Information and Culture, Lai Mohammed, has hailed the ringing global endorsement which President Muhammadu Buhari received from world leaders during his recent trip to the U.S. for the 71st session of the UN General Assembly, and appealed to Nigerians to continue to support the president. In a statement issued in Lagos and signed by the Special Assistant to the Minister, Segun Adeyemi, the minister said it was particularly delightful to hear from world leaders that President Buhari's determined and committed leadership, as well as his integrity, have given Nigeria a positive image in the Committee of Nations. He said the global community's appreciation of the giant strides that have been made by President Buhari's administration in fighting terrorism and corruption, as well as in deftly managing the nation's economy at a time of global economic downturn, is an indication that the administration is on course in its quest to ensure a better life for the people. The minister maintained that 3 areas, the economy, security, and the fight against corruption, are the priorities of the Buhari administration, and its efforts have not gone unnoticed globally, despite the attempts by naysayers to pull the wool over the eyes of Nigerians. World leaders, including U.S. President Barack Obama, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, French President Johan Schneider-Ammann, all took turns to extol President Buhari's leadership. Lai Mohammed appealed to Nigerians to allow it to serve as a source of hope and pride to all who have borne the brunt of the difficulties associated with the current economic downturn, as well as the country's negative global image in the past. While thanking Nigerians for their perseverance, there's no doubt that by continuing to give their unalloyed support to the president, they will be ensuring that these tough times will not last. He said the fact that the president was able to highlight and seek a global rallying point on critical issues during his trip will have a positive effect on the country. He also expressed the optimism that the country will soon begin to reap the benefits of the U.S.-Africa Business Forum and the meeting with top Nigerian professionals, which took place on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. The Nigerian Army says the latest video clip released by the so-called Abubakar Shekau faction of the Boko Haram remnants group confirms an earlier suspicion that the purported factional terrorist group leader is mentally sick and unstable. Acting Director, Army Public Relations, Colonel Sani Usman says the leader of the group, in his usual insane manner, made all sorts of assertions to the point of threatening various towns, groups, and individuals. He also made futile attempts to deny the air raid by the Nigerian Air Force in which he was wounded. The public, especially residents of Maiduguri, Kano, Kaduna, and Zaria, are enjoined not to bother with the contents of the video, as the military is more than equipped to defend them given the facts on ground. The video, the army says, clearly indicates that the so-called Abubakar Shekau has derailed from practicing the Islam he professes to follow, which his antecedents depict him as irrational and unreliable in negotiations on the release of the abducted Chibok girls, who he must therefore release unconditionally. Colonel Sani Usman, however, says a window still exists for repentant terrorists to lay down their arms and surrender to justice. The Insurgency Victim Support Fund Committee has donated agro-products to internally displaced persons and their host communities in Taraba State. The relief items are to enable them go into farming and be producers of their food crops rather than waiting for food from others.
Instead of somebody giving them 5 measures of maize or 5 measures of rice, now, once they farm and they harvest, it will be more than bags.
We have provision of all these materials for 2,000 IDP households. So, and each household can go to as much as 10 people in a household. So the people that benefit from this are obviously way more than the 2,000.
They give us, each household is 4 bags of fertilizer. That is 2 bags of NPK 15-15, 2 bags of 20-10-10, and 10 kg of each household to get maize, 10 kg.
Minister of Water Resources Suleiman Adamu says there's no going back on the ministry's commitment to supporting the government's agriculture development policy. The minister said this in a message to the flag-off of the second Graduates and Youth Empowerment Scheme in Abuja, Ogun State capital.
The beneficiaries will subsequently be empowered through other government intervention programs to establish their own agri-ventures or become trainers in their own right, thereby creating a multiplier effect to further sustain the objectives of the program with the attendant positive impact on the economy through improved food production and employment generation.
And that's the news. Good Morning Nigeria will continue with Rhoda and Kingsley after the break.
If you hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Pump it up while your feet are stomping and the jam is pumping. Look ahead, the crowd is jumping. Pop up your drum and push up your hand. You know, say me fans them plenty like sun. Jump up and dance, make them understand. Say me energy could have never be contraband. No matter what life throws at me, I can handle it constantly. All of my fans them invited. DJ, make my day.
Make my day. Make my day. Make my day.
Why don't you people sell imported materials here? As beautiful as the shop is.
Auntie, buying foreign goods does not help our economy. Neither does it boost local production. And the good thing is Nigerian-made products are high quality.
Really?
And to make Nigeria great again, that is why I only sell made in Nigeria products. Because change begins with me.
I'm convinced. Change begins with me too!
Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Welcome back. You're still on to Good Morning Nigeria. Now let's bring you up to date with some business news as the Minister of Budget and National Planning says government has no plans to sell national assets. Details of these and more in our business news with Joy Uzo.
Ahead of the upcoming Nigeria Economic Summit, the Minister of Budget and National Planning, Udoma, has said the federal government is working to diversify the country's economy in the face of the current recession. Stating this over the weekend, Udoma said government has no plans to sell national assets as a panacea for the current economic recession ravaging the country. Some Nigerians, like Africa's richest man Aliko Dangote, President of the Senate Bukola Saraki, had called on the government to sell off capital-intensive but dormant establishments in the country. Frowning at the call, Udoma explained that government's main strategy is to implement capital projects in the 2016 budget and source for funds to reflate the economy. He said government appreciates that the downturn in the economy has brought hardship to the people. However, they are committed to redressing the situation, adding that their goal is to unlock the economic potentials of the non-oil and high employment sectors so as to achieve a sustainable, inclusive growth that will ensure that the majority of Nigerians become more productive, thereby reducing poverty. The minister noted that the strategy is to reflate the economy through fiscal stimulus and strategic implementation of annual budgets. Worried by the incessant complaints from telecommunication consumers across the country, the Nigerian Communication Commission has assured consumers that it will protect them from such excesses. Director Consumer Affairs Bureau of the Commission, Abdullahi Mikano, stated this at the 78th edition of the Commission's Consumer Outreach Program held in Kano. He says the Commission will do everything possible within its power to protect telecom consumers from exploitation by other service providers. He explained that the outreach was purposely aimed at bringing together service providers, consumers and NCC, the regulatory agency. According to him, the sensitization campaign was necessary to educate telecom consumers about their rights in the communication industry. The director disclosed that the Commission has developed a series of initiatives with the aim of providing consumers with the necessary and basic information for their rights protection. Following over-dependency on consumption of foreign information technology solutions by Nigerians, the market for both local personal computers and software appears to be shrinking by the day. This development is not only killing local capacities, but is also making the Nigerian market a dumping ground. With this development, the Nigerian Computer Society, the Institute of Software Practitioners of Nigeria, ISPON, and the Certified Computer Manufacturers of Nigeria, CCMON, have warned on the dangers of neglecting the implementation and monitoring of local content on it. According to them, Nigeria will continue to be a consuming nation in the 21st century knowledge economy unless the federal government reverses the trend. Worried with the ugly trend, the NCS, at the just concluded 2016 National Conference held in Abuja, noted that there was need to have homegrown technology instead of relying on foreign technology to solve our local issues. In a communique issued at the end of the conference, President of NCS, Professor Shola Aderomu, advised the federal government to patronize certified computer manufacturers of Nigeria, CCMON, as full implementation of local content policy will create more wealth, resolve the problems of unemployment, and build capacity of youths. Finally, on business news, next is a graphic summary of trading on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange for Friday, September 23rd. With business news, I'm Joy Uzo.
Thank you very much there, Joy Uzo, for the business package. Up next for us now is a review of the headlines in some of the papers we have with us this morning.
All right, Bayo Atoyebi, our newspaper reviewer, is already seated here with us in the studio. Bayo, good morning.
Good morning, Rhoda. You're looking bright. I'm sure you had a restful weekend. Good morning, Kingsley.
Very restful.
Good morning, Nigeria.
All right. Bayo, as always, we have a number of stories on the front pages, mainly dealing with politics and the economy. But let's begin with a story that headlines a number of the front pages that we have this morning. Daily Trust. The lead story says, crack in APC as Tinubu says Oyegun must go. That's the lead story for Daily Trust. Now, it's similarly worded for the Punch newspaper. The Punch has it this way: crisis hits APC as Tinubu says Oyegun must go. And it has a writer, alleges national chairman manipulated Ondo primary. Details of the story can be found on page 14. For Vanguard newspaper, it's a headline above its nameplate, and it says, APC crisis. That's the kicker. Tinubu attacks Oyegun, says he has betrayed our trust. Details of that can be found on page 31. I'm sure, Rhoda, you also have those headlines. Yes.
Well, definitely, Kingsley. And on the Nation captions it this way: Tinubu, Oyegun must go. And if we now turn our attention to this day, just above the masthead, it says Ondo APC crisis. Tinubu demands Oyegun dismissal. That's it, Fire.
Yes. The Vanguard said he, in fact, issued a communique, while the Nation says it was a statement, and he is alleged to have accused Chief Odije Oyegun of sabotage in the Odo State by ordering the decision of the appeal panel and called for a fresh election. He overruled that decision. To put it succinctly, he says, to rescue the party, Chief Oyegun must go. What is the background? There was primaries for the APC governor ticket held in September. A candidate was said to have emerged. There were allegations about the delegates list being tampered with. Petitions were filed. Investigations board went into it, inquired into the petition, and recommended for a fresh primary elections. This was tabled before the National Working Committee, and the committee was said to have voted 6 against 5 for a new primaries. However, at the end of the day, it was alleged that a candidate's name had already been submitted to INEC. There has been no response so far from the chairman of the All Progressive Congress, Chief John Odije Oyegun.
All right, Bayo, well, let's take one or two other political stories from the front page of the Punch newspaper. The Punch, and the piece there says, Edo poll, that's a special section. Obaseki and Isaiah Yamu's wives divide voters. We made arrests after postponement, that's according to the police, and INEC distributes materials today. Now, those are the headlines that we're taking in terms of politics. Now, to the economy. We also have stories there from the Punch newspaper above the nameplate. Asset sale, that's the kicker. Pengasan and TUC threaten to shut down Nigeria. Details of that on page 7. And now coming to the foot of the front page of the Punch newspaper, we have this headline: I can't predict when recession will end, says Adeosun. Adeosun is Kemi Adeosun, Minister of Finance. Details of the story on page 27. Now, we also have the same economic story on the front page of Daily Trust. Asset sale. It says oil workers threaten total shutdown. Details of that on page 6. And then at the foot of the front page, just above the strip advert you have there, it says 800 ghost accounts on federal government pension payroll and budget crisis. I'm ready for jail. That's the former chair of the House Committee on Appropriation, Jibrin. Details on page 3. And on page 15, recession tops agenda as federal government and state finance chiefs meet. That's what you have there. And Rhoda, just before you come here, let me also take this one from Vanguard. Lead story on the front page of Vanguard. Vanguard says, renewed attacks. Niger Deltans say no to Avengers. But lead story says, sale of national assets. Prepare for mass revolt. Labour tells federal government. And NLC factions, TUC, Pengasan, Nupeng threaten to shut Nigeria and struggle with dwarf anti-SAP riots of 1989. That's according to Ajero. Presidency keeps mum.
And I'd like to also begin with the Edo elections, and that's on page 41 and 43. It says, Edo 2016, banks to open on Tuesday, why voters should reject PDP. And also another rider, Ize Yamu, to voters resist rigging. Obaseki, the quiet tempest. That's on The Nation. Now let's go to this day, some economic stories here. FX scarcity, that's above the masthead, heightens concerns over banks' euro bond obligation. And below the masthead, Adeosun, spending on capital projects are strategy to get out of recession, where the rider says federal government yet to decide on specific asset for sale. Economy tops agenda as federal government, states and others meet in Ogun. AFDB president to meet government officials Tuesday. And of course, let me just quickly take the big story on this day. AGF seeks further evidence to prosecute Saraki. Ikweke Madam.
Well, let's start with the economy. The Pengassan is at it again. They say the move to sell national assets to solve short-term financial problems regarding recession is unacceptable. They say that some opportunistic businessmen and short-sighted politicians are advocating for the sale of 1, LNG, 2, 4 refineries, 3, Nigeria's stake in Africa's Finance Corporation, and 4, concession of 4 airports. There's also call for reduction of government shares in upstream oil joint ventures. This meant handing our nation's wealth to a few individuals. But Pengassan has proposed his own way of going about it. They say government should look for other ways to increase the revenue base. They should plug all loopholes and leakages in government finances. They should reflate the economy by executing capital projects at all levels of government and pay workers' salary to revive the economy. They say any attempt to sell the national asset will be met with stiff resistance. However, the Minister of Finance too is on record saying that she cannot predict when the recession will end. But surely, all the initiatives and efforts to reflate the economy have already begun to yield results. We will get into growth, and getting into growth is the beginning of the impetuses to get out of recession. And it is because the stimulus that government is providing is already yielding results, particularly in the areas of agriculture and solid minerals. And the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, at the 56th Interdenominational Service, said that there is hope for Nigeria. And he said that, like the Israelites, when they almost lost hope with their trip towards the promised land, Nigeria certainly, particularly led by the Buhari administration, will get to the promised land. Nigerians should be very patient.
All right, Bayo, let's return to Vanguard newspaper. Vanguard newspaper, above the nameplate, we have a kicker there. Falona's allegations. I'm ready for probe. Emir Sanusi, that's the Emir of Kano. And Falona lied on $7 billion diversion. That's according to Soludo. Both Sanusi and Soludo are former CBN governors. Also there on the front page of Vanguard, Edo showdown. APC, PDP trade allegations. Details on 42 and 43. Federal government urges U.S. to lift ban on Nigeria's crew. That's on page 8. And at the bottom of the front page of Vanguard, Boko Haram leader Shekau alive in new video. But there's a rider, Shekau insane, unstable, according to the army spokesman. Details on page 9. That story is also there on the front page of Punch above the nameplate.
Actually, troops of Nigerian army came under attack at Logomani. This is a border town between Nigeria and Niger, but they were repelled. Unfortunately, we lost 4 soldiers, 2 were injured, but 22 of the terrorists were decimated. But already, as it is, the insurgents are at their video games again. They've now placed another message on YouTube where Shekau has revived again and is now saying that he's still leading. And what this points out is that there is a faction within the insurgent group. You may recall that not quite long ago, they said that Barnawi, who is the son of late Yusuf Mohammed, is now their leader.
All right, on that note, Bayo Atobi, we'd like to thank you for being with us. Fresh and bright on Monday. We'll see you again tomorrow, Tuesday.
Tomorrow will be another day.
All right, we'll take a short break now. When we return, of course, we'll be taking on the high lending rates and the implications for the Nigerian economy.
Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me.
They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria, unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
The NTA ETV National Children's Expo for Scientific, Technological and Artistic Inventions is in its 10th edition. We are set to make history again, live at the NTA Headquarters Arena, Area 11, Garki, Abuja, with the theme Improved Technology and Impetus for Mechanized Agriculture, Renewable Energy and Economic Development of the Nation. Date, Sunday, October 23rd to Thursday, October 27, 2016, 9 a.m. each day. As usual, this event is open only to junior categories of ages 6 to 12 years and senior categories of 13 to 18 years in both arts, science or technology. Participants must be in the school system. Are you ready to be a part of the biggest gathering of Nigerian children with creative and innovative ideas? Note, all NTA stations nationwide are implored to complete their preliminary competitions ahead of the Abuja event in October.
President Muhammadu Buhari has approved the program of events to commemorate Nigeria's 56th independence anniversary. Detail of the low-key program is as follows. Friday, 30th September, public lecture 11 a.m. to 12:50 p.m. Venue, National Mosque, Abuja. Attendance is open. Jumat prayers 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. Venue, National Mosque, Abuja. Attendance is open. Saturday, 1st October, Presidential Change of Guard. Venue, forecourt of the Presidential Villa, State House, Abuja. Attendance is strictly by invitation. Bolaji Adebi, Director Press, Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation. Announcer.
All right, welcome back. Time now for us to focus on our discussion this morning, which is the high lending rate and its implication on Nigeria's economy. The high interest rate on bank loans, which is well over 35% in Nigeria, has continued to present major hindrances to the firm growth, particularly in the manufacturing sector. The Minister of Finance, Kemi Adeosun, at a media briefing prior to the Monetary Policy Committee meeting of the Central Bank of Nigeria, had advised the Apex Bank to cut down on the monetary policy rate from 14%, saying high interest rates will not help the nation at this time of economic recession. However, against the backdrop of a slowly contrasting economy and sharply rising inflation, the Monetary Policy Committee, MPC of the Central Bank of Nigeria, maintained that monetary policy rate at 14% at its September meeting.
Retain the MPR at 14%, retain the CRR at 22.5%, retain the liquidity ratio at 30%, and retain the asymmetric window at plus 200 and minus 500 basis points around the MPR.
All right, well, that was the central bank governor there, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, giving the rationale for the retention of the MPC rate, at 14%. Now, we have a number of guests with us here at the Abuja studios, as well as at Lagos Network Center. We would like, at this time, to first welcome Mr. Folusha Phillips, former chairman, Nigerian Economic Summit Group. Is right there at our Lagos Network Center. There are three guests, so I'll just introduce them one after the other. Mr. Folusha Phillips, as I indicated earlier, former chair of the Economic Summit Group. And then we also have with him there Mr. Abubakar Suleiman, as Executive Director of Finance and Strategy at Sterling Bank. That's the PLC. And then also there is the Reverend Isaac Agoye, Vice President, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. Gentlemen, our pleasure to have you join us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Morning.
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 And then we also have with us here in the Abuja studios, well, a familiar face has not been here for quite a while now, so you're on the hot seat this morning. Dr. Moses Tule, he's the Director of Monetary Policy at the Central Bank of Nigeria. Dr. Tule, once again, I'd like to have you on the program.
Good morning, Nigerians.
Okay. All right, Rhoda.
All right, let's begin with Reverend Agoye, who's in our Lagos Network Center. You are a manufacturer. What is your experience like with the present interest rates? Just give us what the situation is like for you as a manufacturer with the rates that we have right now.
It's not good for industries in Nigeria. Life is very difficult for manufacturers, especially the small, medium industries, because with this high interest rate, they are not able to produce and be able to make the necessary profit that is required. I understand there are other factors that go along with it, but since we are addressing the high interest rate is not good for industries. It needs to go down.
Next to you there is Mr. Abubakar Suleiman, Executive Director of Sterling. The NPR is at 14%, but obviously any borrower who is coming to you now will have to top that up. There are all kinds of charges. We understand the banks obviously will introduce. We have had guests on this program say that at the current NPR of 14%, no bank is getting anything out for less than 30%. Why is it that the top up by the banks is always so high?
I think if we want to look at how we arrive at lending rate, let us look at what goes into the rate rather than what the bank charge to recover it. So for instance, if you speak with a lot of people today, they will tell you that the NPL, the non-performing loans in the sector is in the neighborhood of 10%, which means that out of every 100 naira you give out, 10 naira of it you are not going to get back. Given that banks are lending depositors money, there is no way they are going to go back to depositors to say they didn't get back 10 naira of it. They must make whole the 100. So one of the items that goes into lending rate is the performance or the non-performing loans of the sector. And that is the function of so many things that we can talk about today, but that's not the topic, whether it is the power issue or whether it is policy-related issue. When these sectors fail at the rate at which they fail today, it means that they are not able to pay back the loans at the level at which they should pay back. And when they can't pay back, it means that to make sure you can remain in business, you have to charge a little bit more than you would normally charge. That is just one example of what goes into the cost of lending rate. Of course, if you look at the other costs in banking today, whether it is the NDIC cost that all banks have to pay on deposit, or it is the AMCON levy that banks have to pay, or it is even the cost of balance sheet from cash reserve of well over 20%. These are the things that goes into the cost. So when you see the other side of it, it's only an attempt to recover this cost and to have a little profit left for the investors that have put money in bank. So we should focus on what goes into the cost rather than how the cost is recovered.
All right, but Mr. Suleiman, thank you very much. We'll come back to you and then to the Reverend Agoye. But earlier we introduced Mr. Felusha Phillips. Mr. Felusha Phillips, for outsiders who are looking at us, they often wonder how the economy survives at the current lending rate. I mean, it's never been any less than 20-25% now. With all the additional charges, you're hitting 30%. You just listen to the rationale provided by Mr. Abubakar Suleiman. Could it have been otherwise?
Well, I think most admit that even the manufacturers themselves are extremely surprised at the kind of rates they have to pay. The bottom line is that we've got to take a few steps back and see the context in which the whole economy is being driven. We say that we have an environment in which, apart from interest rates, manufacturers are trying to operate where we don't have the right infrastructure, the right institutional arrangements to support them, and therefore we have additional pressure that is building up within any manufacturing scenario, whereby it's actually extremely difficult to manufacture in a way that makes it affordable. The question of interest rate is related also to the fact that we've got to try and look at pressure on foreign exchange, the whole macroeconomic situation where we're saying, do we try and grow our economy based on a reflationary type of strategy, or one in which we try to contain it? Definitely manufacturers struggle to get the right kind of price to the consumer. And when they have to, it's one step to be able to generate or to produce the goods. It's another thing for the consumer to be able to afford whatever it is that's being produced. So I think that to a great extent, we've got to look at our policy. Where do we want to lay emphasis? Can we have very discriminatory pricing in terms of who it is that we give preferential treatment as far as interest rates are concerned? Have we identified areas in which we feel that we need to support the manufacturers so that we can generate the kind of foreign exchange we need on one hand, and also help for self-sufficiency within our economy to reduce the amount of foreign exchange that we require? So sometimes we've got to be careful about having a very blanket approach to this whole concept of manufacturing. Who is manufacturing what? What are the things that are essential to us? I think to a great extent we need to be able to feed our nation. We need to be able to have a very powerful value chain that helps to reduce the amount of import requirements and therefore foreign exchange that we require. And also trying to have a situation whereby the skills and capabilities of manufacturing is one that can be enhanced very quickly and get us on a much more rapid route to generating a good and comfortable revenue for the economy. So it's a bit wider than that. And I know that my banker friend here has just explained all the intricacies of pricing. But beyond that, what's the policy and the framework within we're trying to drive the whole economy? I think this is important to consider.
All right, Funshaw Phillips would come to you much later in the course of this discussion. But then let's bring in the Director Monetary Policy of the Central Bank of Nigeria. You've listened to our guests in Lagos. The central bank has cited so many reasons for the rate to be at 14%, and one of it is inflation. But then the question in the minds of a lot of people is, if you're trying to contain inflation, how do you intend to still stimulate the economy, looking at the state that we're in right now, at the same time with the interest rate at this benchmark?
Yeah, thank you very much, Rhoda. I think first of all, we need to understand that Nigeria is not just in a recession. We've made this point very clear. Nigeria is in stagflation. Stagflation is a more difficult economic condition to deal with. In a recession, you can spend your way out of recession. In a stagflation, you can't spend your way out of a stagflation. You make the situation even more complex, because in a stagflation, you have your inflation rising and you have growth falling. In a recession, you are only contending with falling growth. So you can stimulate the economy by stimulating aggregate consumption, by good investment, targeted expenditure, and then the economy could pick up. But you can't do that in a stagflation or under stagflationary conditions. Now, when the Monetary Policy Committee met, it met against the backdrop that the economy was already in stagflation. And it wasn't a quick fix. A simple reduction in interest rate was never and would never take the country out of where we are. So, and having the menu and the data that was available to the central bank, there is no way the Monetary Policy Committee could have just gone ahead to take the decision to reduce interest rate. That's one. Then two, if you look at the character or the feature or the characteristics of the behavior or reaction of interest rate in this economy to monetary policy decisions, they are very sticky. Most of the time we have reduced the CRR. Our work talks about part of the cost of the interest rate as being CRR. We reduced CRR from 75 to 20%. What was the reaction in terms of lending rates? Still very sticky. The banks didn't react. They didn't react. In this country, we have reduced the NPR to 6%. Go back, look at the data, 2009, 2010. We reduced CRR down, NPR down to 6%. What was the reaction in terms of credit to private sector? Very suppressed. So the rigidities within the economy makes it extremely difficult for the banks to react when interest rates are reduced. So it's not as simplistic as it sounds when you simply say reduce interest rate, reduce the NPR so that interest rate would come down.
So what you're saying now, I want, so that we can get this very clear for the purpose of this discussion, is that we're not just only dealing with recession here.
Exactly.
We are dealing with stagflation and recession at the same time.
Stagflation encompasses recession.
Okay.
It also tells you that you have a price problem. And right now what we have is the country is dealing with twin deficits. You have a deficit in the current account, which is the external sector is not properly balanced, and then you have the deficit in the fiscal sector. So you have these twin deficits of fiscal deficits and current account deficits. It does not require half-hearted approach in terms of simplistically or simply reducing interest rate. It can't deliver, it's not the holistic policy menu you are looking at addressing the problem.
Well, Dr. Tule, you have, shall we say officially now, indicated that this is not just a recession, but it's a stagflation. Does that mean that we are closer to a depression? And how would you reconcile that with the optimistic view that was expressed only a couple of weeks ago that by December this year, the numbers will be much brighter than we have seen earlier this year?
Okay, again, there's a backdrop to that. First of all, let's look at the U.S. economy. In all the years of that economy, they've gone through this kind of situation maybe about 2 times or so. First in the 1930s, then in the 1970s. In the 1970s, the reaction was, okay, increase interest rates. In the 1970s, that's in the U.S. And that is what led to the debt crisis globally, because an increase in interest rate in the United States simply meant higher cost of borrowing globally. And countries, developing countries, when that had accumulated debt, had to have very huge debt arrears, and then they couldn't pay, and there was the debt crisis that lingered on for several years. The option could have been reduce interest rates. The recent global financial crisis which we had came as a result of reduction in interest rate to levels that even people who had no jobs could go out there and pick loans. You know exactly what came out of it. So when you are in a situation like this, you can't just say, this is where we are today, but tomorrow we'll be out there tomorrow. Because first, look at inflation. Inflation, we had legacy factors associated with the current rate of inflation. Part of the legacy factors also are reform-induced. One of them is the repricing of petroleum products. It was reform-induced. Secondly, the repricing of the electricity tariffs. That was also reform-induced. And these in themselves had an element of increasing the price levels across the country broadly. So what we are having, although we are having month-on-month inflation falling, that's a base effect. It has a base effect. That inflation is a base effect because inflation last year, month-on-month, slower than what we have today. So going into 2016, right now we haven't seen those policies that would tell us that we are already turning the curve. The data for the third quarter is not very bright because the economy, this economy, the data shows that it is about 8% GDP is from oil. But of the 92% that is left, about 60% of it is oil related. That is 60% of the 92 of the non-oil economy is oil related. So if you take 60% of that and then the 8% of the regional GDP that is oil related, you see that the entire economy is more than 50% based on oil. And once you have a problem with the oil sector, there's no quick fix to it. And especially if it has within the elements that are inducing upward price spiral. It's extremely very complex.
Well, Dr. Moses Tule, thank you very much. We'll come back to you to amplify some of the points that you just touched on. Just to return to our Lagos Network Center, the Reverend Agoye is the Vice President of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. One point that Dr. Tule, that is the CBN Director, has indicated here is that part of what we have seen in 2016, the consequences have been as a result of reforms. For instance, the removal of subsidy on petrol, and then also the review of electricity tariff. How did this impact the manufacturing sector?
Generally, life is extremely very difficult for manufacturers during this time, especially the second half of the year 2016 that we are in. Most manufacturing companies in Nigeria are not able to break even. Most of them will really make losses. We have seen what some companies are even publishing in the newspapers. I mean, what is happening to them. So all those steps that have been taken are really making life extremely difficult for manufacturers. And the point I want to say is that, you see, in Nigeria, for example, we have over 2,500 member companies in the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. And then we have many of them, more than 80% of them, are small and medium industries that are really feeling the pinch much more than the big ones. The big ones are feeling it, but the SMEs are even in a very, very difficult situation that they can't get what they need from the banks. And you find that situation that some of them even have to go to finance houses who will charge them, instead of per annum, they will charge them per month. And that's something that we cannot think about. So all the steps that are taken, whether on the increasing the cost of oil, I mean whether diesel or petrol, we find that all those things will affect our production. And we need help from the government. The people who are supervising the banks need to actually see what they can do to assist us. We need to be able to have special interest rates for manufacturers, genuine manufacturers. And we can prove to you those who are genuine manufacturers so that they don't pay more than 5% interest rate. And if they do that, that will also help to reduce the pressure upon us. And the other issues, because those are not things that we are talking about now, I don't want to go into them, but all those ones also, we need to do this very well. And for this nation to make progress, we need to support the industries. We employ more people, but when we are not able to do things very well, the effect is that some of the companies are going down. Some of my friends who are also manufacturers, they have to close shop and then send away their employees. This situation should not continue like this. We need the government to help us and assist us to make sure that we can continue to produce and make reasonable profit.
Well, the Reverend Agoye, you have sitting beside you there, Executive Director of Sterling Bank. And earlier, while he was talking about some of the cost centers that the banks normally will consider in fixing their own rates using the base points of MPR, he talked about the ratio of non-performing loans, in some cases 10%. A non-performing loan means that, of course, borrowers are not repaying. Some of those borrowers are manufacturers. Why are we having such a high default rate amongst manufacturers, for instance?
Thank you very much. The question is, really, why are they not paying back? If they borrow money, at what rate do they borrow the money from the banks? And you know, they have to put down collaterals and so many other things. When they manage to do that one, and then they borrow, and they produce, and there's people are not able to buy their products in the price that they fix, because if they put all the costs together and they put a little margin on it, don't forget that they also have shareholders who are expecting dividends from them. And so they go to the market and they find that people are not buying. And when they are not able to sell their products and the products are there, then they are not able to pay back the banks. And then they are forced to maybe retrench reduce some benefits to themselves and to the employees, and just they're struggling. And that's really the truth. They're struggling. So because of the recession in the economy, and the life is difficult for majority of Nigerians, so they are not able to sell their products. And then they have to reduce prices or do some other things to be able to neutralize the effect of the price increase. So it is the situation in the nation that is making it difficult for them. Otherwise, they will want to pay back their loans.
All right, thank you very much, Reverend Isaac Agoy. He is the Vice President, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, and he's joined us from Lagos. I want to thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
All right, we'll take a short break now, and when we return, we have two other guests joining us on this discussion. Stay with us.
Don't go there. Professor is not around.
Your father asked me this.
Don't be silly.
Don't be quack. I was talking. I just say, Prof, they find fair, fine girl. Now I say, make I bring this my Rihanna.
I was not so yellow girl. I was so yellow face. I'm black body.
This week on your award-winning comedy series, Professor John Bull, starring Kanayo Okanayo, Mercy Johnson, Queen Wokoye, Funky Malam, Oguz Baba, Ime Bishop, Yomi Fash Lanso, MC for God, Stephen Odingbe.
I almost pretend you're here.
We are not eating pepper meat.
Bedoya, smart!
Hey!
Olani, smart!
Professor John Bull, fasten your seatbelts this Tuesday and Friday, 8:30 to 9 p.m. on NTA Network, International, and Star Times. It's absolutely bombastic.
Over and out.
The largest data network, Glow, grandmasters of data.
We intend to radically change Newman Street. My company has a track record of converting slums into new cities. Many years of experience has taught us to fish out allies within the communities we want to transform.
Don't listen to your husband. Listen to me. Give me a boy. And the two of you may never even have to work again.
Sharp guy, how are you? What's your name?
Akpos. America.
Oh, Akpos America.
Yeah, one, not be two.
Wonderful wonder! Wonderful wonder!
The National Council on Finance and Economic Development, NACOFED 2016, will be holding its annual conference in collaboration with the Federal Ministry of Finance. Theme of the conference is enhancing revenue generation and obtaining best value for money in expenditure. Participants: all state commissioners of finance, all state accountants general, all state permanent secretaries of finance ministries, all state commissioners of budget and planning, all state chairman board of internal revenue, all state permanent secretaries, budget, and all other finance stakeholders. Goodwill message by former President Chief Olusegun Obasanjo GCFR. Keynote address by His Excellency Senator Ibikunle Amosun, CON FCA Executive Governor of Ogun State. Welcome address by Mrs. Kemi Adeosun, Honorable Minister of Finance. Date 27 to 28 September 2016. Venue Green Legacy Resort, Abeokuta, Ogun State. Time 8 a.m. daily. Announcer Local Organizing Committee.
All right, welcome back. But if you just tuned in, it's Good Morning Nigeria, and we are reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. As you can see from the caption on the screen, we are discussing high lending rates and the implications for the economy. A moment ago, we signed off the vice chair of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. We still have two other guests at the Lagos Network Center, but we've been joined by two other guests now, one here in the Abuja studios and then the other in Lagos. First, we'd like to welcome Honorable Sadiq Ibrahim. He's a member of the House of Representatives, and earlier he had also been Speaker of Adamawa House of Assembly and had a career at Habib Bank. Honorable Sadiq, it's our pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you, Bruce. Good morning.
All right. And at our Lagos Network Center, we're also been joined by another familiar face on Good Morning Nigeria, Mr. Tilewa Adebajo. He's a financial analyst. Mr. Adebajo, a pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning.
All right, Mr. Tulewa, let's begin with you, and then we'll come back again. Welcome back to the Abuja studios. Earlier, the CBN Director of Monetary Policy introduced what would appear to be a new twist by saying that indeed what the economy is in is not just a recession, but indeed a stagflation. What is your opinion?
Very much. First of all, I think I beg to disagree with the Director of Monetary Policy. And I think that the central bank has to begin to move away from a theoretical economic analysis into more of applied economics. And this is why I say so. Stagflation is a situation whereby you are not experiencing growth for a period of time. And that is why they use the word stagnant or stagnate. The situation we face ourselves is more severe than stagflation. And I think the earlier the monetary authorities realize that, I think we can begin to have more of a coordinated solution. In 2014, that's a year and a half ago, the GDP of Nigeria was 7.5% for non-oil, and the total GDP, including the oil sector, was about 6.3. Today, you have a situation whereby our GDP is minus 2.3. That is about an 8% basis or 800% fall in our GDP. If we haven't woken up, let us wake up that our GDP has crashed by 800%. And it's not only a crash, it is a free fall. Our economy has gone into a free fall. And I think the earlier we understand that we're in a recession that is growing deeper, and the issues of stagflation are completely different. You are stagnating when you are not growing for a significant period. This drop has happened in only a year and a half. And I think the earlier the monetary authorities realize this and respond to that adequately, we can discuss. My good friend here has explained, the executive director from Sterling Bank, how pricing mechanisms affect them. And a lot of all these issues about trying to mop up liquidity or trying to use your interest rates to attract foreign portfolio investors into the country, these policies are going to fail. I'm a practitioner. I've worked in the international financial markets. I've worked in the local financial markets. The foreign portfolio investors are icing on the cake. If you have not baked your cake, they're not going to come and put the icing on it. So we shouldn't put the cart before the horse. We need to address the fundamentals first before we begin to look for these portfolio investors. We are out of the JP Morgan index. The reason why JP Morgan took us out of the index was they said that we should implement a two-tier foreign exchange system. The question I want to ask Mr. Tuli is that 2-3 years ago, when the JP Morgan people asked you guys to do the two-tier system, you stalled and you did not engage them, and they lost confidence, and $30 billion went out of the system. 2 years, now you've implemented this in May. It is your timing of the policies that is causing this problem. And what we also need is a coordinated approach to the economy. You cannot be contracting the economy on the monetary side when the fiscal side is trying to provide a stimulus. If there are structural deficits from the fiscal side, yes, we know there are structural challenges from the fiscal side, address it so that we can come up with the policies. Yes, everybody, we accept the fact that you do not want the economy to go the way of Zimbabwe or Venezuela with hyperinflation. We respect that decision. But what are you doing about the quantitative easing of the economy in a recession? These are the sort of coordinated policies from the monetary side, from the fiscal side. The last time I saw you speaking, you said, yes, you cannot clap with one hand. So you need to work with the fiscal authorities. The Debt Management Office supervises a monetary and fiscal policy coordinating committee. We've not heard from that committee in a while. You need to restore confidence into the economy. These are the challenges we're having.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tilewa. You have raised a lots of talking heads that we will continue to look at as the discussion goes on. But then let's get to Mr. Mr. Tule, he's just said something I was going to take you on, and that's the issue of the fact that there seemed to be a lack of coordination between the fiscal and the monetary policy. He says if the fiscal policy is trying to stimulate the economy and the monetary policy isn't helping, does there seem to be a lack of coordination? Of course, I know you want to react to some of the things that he said, that this is deeper than a stagflation.
Thank you very much. I think Mr. Tilewa should understand that this is basic economics. With due respect, I insist that this country is in what is greater than a recession. A recession is not greater than a stagflation. Please go and look at your economics. Stagflation is much, much deeper and much more complex. And that's exactly what we are saying. He appears to be saying the same thing with me. It's just that the semantics is what separates us. But let's look at it this way. The fiscal side is trying to stimulate the economy with 300 billion. The central bank has stimulated the economy with more than 5 trillion in the last 2-3 years. Look at the interventions the central bank has put in place. And if you look, we look at the data on a daily basis, that even what is on ground now, what the economy needs is much more than that. What fiscal policy is even bringing to the table is about 300 billion, which is not sufficient to stimulate the economy. Now, to say that there is no coordination, again, is not correct. What we have consistently said, if you had listened to our discussions, our previous discussions, was that there is a need for deeper and more coordinated discussions around what the issues and what the policy direction should be. This has consistently been our focus. And to say that the central bank should awake to its responsibility is uncharitable. Uncharitable in the sense that in this country, from May 2015, there was virtually no fiscal policy. Monetary policy anchored this economy through until ministers were appointed, until the budget was passed, and until they began to disburse funds from the budget. Where was fiscal policy at that time? So you see, we are working together, and we must realize that there is an extent to which fiscal monetary policy can be effective. The tools available to monetary policy are so few, very, very few. And no central bank creates its own tools to work with in an environment that fiscal policy should dominate. And this is the point we are trying to make. So when you sit down to design the suite of policies that should be used in a situation like this, we are saying, where is trade policy? Where is your fiscal policy? Where is your monetary policy? What is the budget policy? When are you going to inject resources into the economy? How much of the resources are you going? What is the program for the injection of the resources? But when the government, we are talking about low interest. Please let us be very clear that the central bank is very much in support of low interest rate. That is why we have reduced CRR several times. We have tinkered with reduction in MPR. But when we look at the impact of monetary growth on price developments and on fixed income earners, as a central bank, we must be careful that we are concerned with price stability. That's key.
All right. Dr. Tule, thanks. Again, we'll come back to you because of the conversation. Earlier, we introduced the Honorable Sadiq Ibrahim. You've listened to the guests, talk about different facets of this topic that we discussed on this morning. What's your take on some of the issues, particularly with regard to the marriage of monetary and fiscal policy measures, and better still, better coordination?
Well, actually, since the beginning of the challenges that this economy is facing, there has always been a call for coordination from the various sectors that deals with this economy. Perhaps our experts in this area have looked at the fact that it was the lack of coordination of these areas that made us to be where we are today. If you listen to the Manufacturers Association representative here, he has made a very, very passionate appeal to the authorities concerned regarding what is happening to manufacturers. There is no way in any economy you can borrow money with such high interest rate and you don't have default. What do we do? I don't think it is right for us as central bank and the bankers that they are, for them, because the way they're speaking now, it appears to me that everybody is throwing their hands in the air and say we don't have a solution. But there has to be a solution. As a country, we have the experts, we have the extant laws that should enforce some of the things that we are doing. As a lawmaker and as somebody who has had a stint in banking, my take on all this is that there are some things that we are doing which we are not enforcing, the laws that we have. And there has always been also, second, there has always been a policy somersault on the part of the authorities, especially financial authorities. Today, the central bank is saying, for instance, you cannot put dollars in your account, DOM account, domiciliary account, and then after some time they say, okay, you can now put. And sometimes you can hear central bank saying that, or the governor of central bank saying that we should go this way, and then a very short while and then he'll come back and say, no, this cannot be done like that. So all these policy somersaults and the lack of coordination between the fiscal and the monetary policy are actually what is causing the problem we have.
All right, Honorable Sadiq, again, we'll come back to you. Let's, Rhoda, let's return to our Lagos Network Center. Mr. Phillips, you've been quiet for a while. Earlier, you fired your first salvo. You talked about, the macroeconomic environment, and from the discussion that we're having and from what is actually also in the public domain, the macroeconomic environment would appear now to be a thicket. How do we begin to make our way out of that thicket? Describe it as stagflation or recession or somewhere near depression.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it is so clear and so obvious, and I'll try and keep this short, that the level of coordination, discussions, integration of policy and direction between, I'll say, the central bank and government, if I can use that generic term, is not as tight as is being presented this morning. Because a lot of issues were actually raised by Dr. Tule himself. As he was reeling them out, I was saying that, well, you're really supposed to know these things if you're all really working together. We cannot, at this stage, be asking ourselves questions when we're both supposed to be working together to create those solutions. From a very practical point of view, I sort of envision and would like to see a situation where both the central bank governor and the Minister of Finance are sitting together and actually coming and explaining to the country what the joint strategy is, saying like, these are the things that we want to do. Yes, we are keeping interest rates high, and to complement that, we're going to be doing this and that and various other issues or decisions that we know that, look, that is what we're in for. So whoever you are, whether you're a manufacturer or somebody who's working in the bank or you're just going to work every day, you have clarity as to what it is that we must face. If the government generally is saying that, look, we are going to focus on agriculture, agribusiness, and at the same time we're going to look at infrastructure, we're going to try and support the whole framework, we're going to try and support the private sector. We know interest rates are high, but the point is we've got to live with it for a while because of the following things. Mine is very simple because, you see, we can get all the experts, Tilewa and everybody else, to talk about all the wonderful things we can do from a macroeconomic point of view. But the reality is that we've got to sit around the table and actually agree what it is we have to do. I just get the sense that there is no coordination, there is no handshake, there is no clapping with two hands. It's not happening. Because if it does, honestly, a lot of solutions, a lot of things will be resolved. We've got a lot of bright people in this country. Everybody's got his own ideas. And I can tell you by the end of today, there'll be 1,001 other ideas coming from different people. But are we sitting down together to sort of say, look, this is what we need to do? I don't think that's happening. And that needs to happen.
All right, thank you very much, Folorunsho Phillips. But then let's get to Ms. Folorunsho Phillips. Let's get to Mr. Tilewa. When you were talking earlier, you said that we need to bake our cake so the foreign investors come and eyes it. And looking at the interest rate, of course, it would favor foreign investors at 14%. And we're saying that we need to stimulate our production, local production in the economy. Does it appear that we're really indeed looking inwards to grow our economy, or we're just looking outwards?
I think I have to, first of all, agree with what Mr. Folusha Phillips has said. Because at the end of the day, you see, we're in a crisis of confidence. And before I answer that question, the whole essence is confidence. We have to have that, what Mr. Phillips has said, as a coordinated approach that the business investors will buy into, the foreign investors will buy into, the financial markets will buy into, the bankers will also buy into it. If you set all these things up properly, then we don't have that problem. But if you try to say you want to use your interest rates to attract foreign investors, the minute you made that as announcement, what happened? All the credit agencies downgraded Nigeria. Our status now for borrowing internationally is junk bond status. So why do you want to increase your interest rates for a junk bond anyway? You are going to have to pay high rates. So you are not telling us anything new. So what we're saying is that let us take a look at the practical steps. First of all, to look inwardly. And baking that cake, like you said, is the inward development. Once you've baked it, then the foreign investors will come and put the icing on it. You are not, the money you are looking for is hot money. And, you know, the mechanisms that you're supposed to support that hot money with, when they asked you to put it in place a year and a half ago, you didn't. You delayed it until May. And they left. So we need to be very careful. That's all I'm saying. And we need that coordinated approach. And because, like I said, let us look at the numbers. GDP fell from 6.3% to minus 2.3% in a year and a half. That is an 800% decrease in your gross domestic product. That is not a crash. We're in free fall. And I think that once we understand that, then I think we'll sit up.
Well, Mr. Tulewa, well, thank you. Mr. Tulewa, thanks. I just want you to clarify a point or speak to a point that oftentimes will be confusing to some of our viewers. Nigerians often also talk about international best practices. Now, while we were introducing this conversation, we referenced what the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank has done, fixing interest rates at no higher than 0.5%. Elsewhere in Europe, there was a consideration sometime of even having negative interest rates. Why is it that in the advanced countries, interest rates are so low, and for us here, the interest rates are usurious?
Well, every environment is different, and these are the structural challenges we face here in Nigeria. And to answer that question directly is the fact that Nigerian economy is a different economy from those sort of economies. Those economies grow, if they grow 2% a year, 3% a year, is a big deal for them. Our own economies are growing at 7%, 10% per annum. That's what we're used to because we're emerging economies. Our growth capacities are very different. And it is these fundamentals that we need to understand. If you take a look at Kenya, for instance, Kenya has their monetary and fiscal policy in alignment. Lending rates are about 10%. So, and they don't have any oil. So what we need to do here is to take a look at the structural changes. And as Dr. Tuli rightly pointed out, the problem was the issue of the petroleum pricing. So let them bring back their targeting inflation. They should tell us how they're going to target inflation going forward. Then we can manage our interest rates better. And like he also said, there was a time when they brought the MPR down to 6%. There was nothing wrong with that, but they didn't sustain it because they felt that the banks, it might pose a systemic risk to the banks, which is fair enough. We have to protect the banking system. So those are the challenges we have, different economies. And I think maybe you should also chip into this to see how it affects the banks because it's very critical to your sector.
Yes. I don't know if you would like me to chip in on that. Okay, so here is the problem. Going back to the primary topic, which is the implication of high interest rate for the economy. Reverend Agoye spoke passionately for manufacturers, and that's nice to hear him. But the same thing applies to education. If you talk to the proprietors of school, they'll give you the same set of problem. If you talk to those in agricultural sector, they have the same problem. So essentially, we have a problem of high interest rate that cuts across, and it's not just about manufacturers. And I think there is also agreement amongst us here that a lower interest rate would benefit the economy. So that is given. The question is, why is the interest rate so high? If you look at the way funding goes into the productive sector, they have the option of equity, which is money from those who are investing, and they have the option of debt. And both of them have to face the same decision. The money I'm about to give to you, what is the alternative use of the money? Which is what you call the hurdle rate for an investment. If that hurdle rate is the risk-free rate, the rate at which government is borrowing, which for long-term, 15, 20 years now, is around 14, 15%, then any investment proposition that does not deliver more than that suddenly becomes a difficult decision. So two things need to happen. The risk premium from risk-free for Nigeria is very high, and it's because we are still in this phase of development. If you want money to flow into those investments, that risk premium, we need to find a way to reduce it, either by improving the ease of doing business and all the policies required, or by reducing the risk in the sector by providing infrastructure. Or the third one is to reduce the risk-free return. So if risk-free return was 5% today, as you have in many other places, then by the time you add whatever premium you are seeking to add to go into the industries and the manufacturing, then it won't be as high as where it is today. So we need to decompose the component of this and then begin to tackle it one by one. The longer issues are around infrastructure and around policies and around alignment and around confidence, as has been highlighted. But the one that are immediate is for us to look at how we have set the hurdle rate that is so high that a lot of investors, not just bank debt, even people who have equity, are asking, they will not put money in a manufacturing venture to earn 15 or 20%. They want to earn what they would have earned on treasury bills plus a significant margin. This is how the cost is built up. And if you want to reduce that cost, you need to decompose it and bring it down. And it's something we must all work together, both regulator and operator.
Well, Mr. Suleiman, thank you very much. Just before we come back to Dr. Tule in the Abuja studios to respond to the points that you gentlemen have articulated at the Lagos Network Center, I would like you also to respond to a point that Dr. Tule made earlier, that namely, in the past, when the CBN lowered interest rates, there seemed to have been no correlation between lower interest rates and lending, to the real sector. In other words, there was, as it were, a freeze. If therefore, the rates are the way they are, then, so be it. Why is it that banks have often not, according to Tule, not responded favorably to lower interest rates?
Again, there are two topics I would like to address to clarify that. The first one is a generic one that says that if you want to believe in a market-based system, you must take a risk on that system. So whether it is in the foreign exchange market where the central bank has opted to go for a market-based system, or it is in interest rate, your faith has to be, it can't be short-term because sometimes you don't get short-term results. If you go into it expecting a 3-month result and you don't get it and then you roll it back, then you never had a chance to really test that it works. But interestingly, these things work, this mechanism works elsewhere in certain prices, and we need to trust it. The second point I want to make is that our experience is it takes a lead time of at least 6 months from the moment you start to engage a relationship to the moment where a credit can happen. And that is because the available data in our sector is very limited, the quality of reporting is limited, the level of advancement of the companies we deal with is limited. So you have to have this prolonged engagement. And therefore, if there is interest rate reduction today, and we expect to see that there would be an immediate reduction in lending rate, it's not going to happen. But if we were committed enough to give it the time that is required, I guarantee you that it will happen. And I can understand the concern because the monetary authority needs some quick results because they are, at least for almost 2 years, responsible really for keeping the economy together, like Dr. Tule said. And they would have liked to see results within 3 months or 6 months. But in my experience, for a country like Nigeria, it will take more than that because the transition mechanism is not as advanced as it should be, and therefore it takes time. And I think it's that time that I would ask for from all the authorities. Whatever we choose to implement in this country, we need to have the patience. The central bank has demonstrated that by continuing to stay with their course of action, even when they had not seen an immediate result. So, for instance, they increased MPR over a period of time. It did not of inflation, but because they are committed and they believe that the policy will work, they stayed put. And I believe that if we continue to show a level of patience with the policy options that we choose, we would realize that they actually work.
Abubakar Suleiman, thank you very much. But then let's get to Mr. Tule here. I'm sure you want to react to some of the things that the gentlemen in Lagos have said.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rhoda. Just to say one brief thing about the JP Morgan issue. It was on this program that the central bank was called upon to defend its position on not devaluing the currency. And at that time, we told Nigerians that we could not devalue the currency because we wanted devaluation to be done within the framework of comprehensive macroeconomic policy, not just taking devaluation policy or as an end in itself, but we could only do it within a framework of policies. Now, to come around to say we didn't devalue the currency on the demands of JP Morgan at the time we were supposed to do it, it's a little bit uncharitable, as if we really didn't know what we are doing here, and as if we have to depend on other people to tell us what to do, how to manage the macroeconomy. And of course, you would agree with me that now, June 20th, we went to the market. We've floated the currency. What has happened from year to date, we've lost 30% of the value of the currency. But that was because of the huge clamor that, look, if you devalue, the Naira will find its level. The currency has been devalued beyond the reasonable point. But that's the market mechanism. We chose the market mechanism in this country in 1986 when we had SAP. And there were three evils. We've heard that we should have preferential access to credit. We've had preferential access to credit from independence up to 1992. Credit never flowed to the sectors of the economy who wanted credit to go. People were still holding on, banks were still holding on to credit. They were not giving credit. We introduced the market mechanism in 1986, but the central bank held on to exchange rate. But we see we've depreciated the currency from 1986 up to the point where we are today. Even holding on to the exchange rate has not worked very well because of the structural deficiencies in the economy. It is the same thing. The same thing applies with the interest rate, which is what Abubakar is trying to explain. That because it's a market mechanism, and we have chosen, we've taken that course as a country in 1986, that we should liberalize certain sectors of the economy. And one of the first to be liberalized was the exchange rate, was the interest rate. Ever since then, the central bank has not been dictating what interest rate is to the rest of the economy. But it is important that we should know that there are agencies of government in this country. There are banks established specifically to deliver low credit to manufacturers. What are they doing? Where is the Bank of Industry? Where is NCRDB? These are development banks that were established knowing fully well. In fact, under Obasanjo's reign, there was a major of some of these institutions who have a stronger institution, a stronger Bank of Industry to deliver credit at low interest rate. It is not, the central banks is to prepare the framework within which interest rate or within which economic agents would function. But when there are structural rigidities, the tools available to the central bank cannot address those structural rigidities. That is the realm of fiscal policy.
All right, Dr. Tule, thanks. But one of the points you just raised now, I'm sure some of our viewers will be concerned about that. If there are specialized banks, you just mentioned Bank of Industry, Bank of Agriculture, and and several others. People are wondering what then is the role of banking supervision also by the CBN, if those institutions are not, as it were, alive, to the rationale for establishing them. We'll come back to take reactions from our guests, but already we have reactions from our viewers who have taken advantage of the Twitter handle. You can see there on the screen at NTA GMA. We take those tweets now. One from Druge Okorie. Druge Okorie tweets, CBN should forget those theories, reduce MPR to single digit, and banks to do the needful to save Nigerians and the economy.
And as Sanusi Lamido tweets, lowering interest rates is also a key process in rescuing the nation out of recession. That is, because through this local production could be encouraged.
And signing Michael Omakoje, it's like this policy is a conspiracy against Nigerians by the stakeholders and the banks, else they wouldn't have kept mute.
At Otega says, I think it's about time the banks realize that the current economic meltdown in Nigeria needs a better approach and a high interest rate.
Well, Otega adds that high bank interest rates are damaging the current economic situation in Nigeria.
And Frank Chinonso says, I think the Ministry of Finance and the Apex Bank has a lot of work to do as regards to that effect.
All right, and then we have Kiriza, 1976. Says it's a recipe, I take that again, Marcel Zanza Kiriza, 1976. It's a recipe for comatose local industries. Now, profiteering is the cause, and it doesn't sit well with the federal government's efforts to come out of the current recession. Well, those are the tweets. In the meantime, let's return to Lagos and then get the views of our guests. But before we get to Lagos, let's listen into Sadiq, Honorable Sadiq Ibrahim. Again, you listen to the other guests, what they have said. In your opinion, what is it that we need to do at this time? How can we bring, the monetary and fiscal authorities together jointly, out of public glare, by the way, and then we have a seamless policy enunciation and implementation?
Well, before I do that, I want to comment on these development banks that have been established by the federal government to take care of specific sectors of the economy. The Bank of Agriculture, Bank of Industry, other federal government interventions in small and medium scale industries where the interest rate is below double digits. The problem is that even where you have interest rate that is below the double digit, there needs to be Nigerians need to have what I can call people have to have values. All these economic theories and the issues that we'll be talking about, if the bankers and the borrowers, bank is an intermediate areas of plenty to areas of want. But if people do not have values, whatever you do, policies are there, very good as they are. You will give interest rate even at a lower digit, but people borrow and don't use the money for the purpose for which they are meant. So many of these manufacturers that I know, with the little stint I had in a big bank, you lend to a manufacturer and you see him driving Lamborghini. You lend to a manufacturer, you see him moving from where he was perhaps in Ikeja to Ikoyi. These are the areas where even if these theories, economic theories that we are rolling, we continue to roll and roll and roll, for as long as Nigerians do not have the will to do what they should do, there is no way these theories will work. You can make a lot of laws, tons and tons of them. We have them, extant laws are there. But if people are not willing to obey the laws, there is no way you can progress. The convergence that we talk about between the monetary policy and the fiscal policy, quite often we need that. But then, no matter how you try to do your monetary policy, if you don't have a good fiscal policy, you don't have roads, you don't have electricity, you don't have security, there is no way a manufacturer or a banker can work and then grow this economy, because as a bank, you have to have security. Not only your own internal security, you have to hire policemen who be in the, who stay inside the banking hall with plain clothes, holding guns. That is additional cost to you. Look at the roads that we have. If you manufacture from Idu, for instance, in Abuja, before you evacuate to Jos, for instance, just ordinarily from Abuja shouldn't be more than 1.5 to 2 hours.
Okay.
So there are so many things that we need to do, but the values that needs to be in Nigerians, believing in themselves and believing in their country, believing in the fact that we have a lot of things, we can do things for ourselves without even looking offshore. That is absolutely important.
Okay, Honorable Sadiq, thanks. Just before we return to Lagos, Dr. Tule, there was a matter that Mr. Abubakar Suleiman tabled in the course of his explanation. It talked about the rate at which government itself borrows. That's, I mean, if government treasury bills are priced at a certain rate, you don't expect the other indices, to be any lower. People want a markup on that. When are we likely to see a change in the rate at which government borrows? Or why does government borrow at the rate at which it does?
No, we did say before that the country faces twin deficits. We have a current account deficit and we have a fiscal deficit. So the government, and even in the 2016 appropriation, you can see there was an element for external borrowing and for domestic borrowing. Government borrowing is a continuum. There's actually no time you say that no government would borrow. The US, for instance, is living entirely on debt. But what happens is, when the government borrows and it shows desperation in its borrowing, that we're going to borrow at by all means, then it becomes a problem to the financial system, in which case that pushes up interest rate. And if the government, for instance, is going to borrow, treasury bills are going to be at 13%, for instance, that's an example, then you don't expect that banks would go and give to a small borrower, like who has a small factory, at 10 or 11 or even 9%, because the government, which is supposed to be a risk-free borrower, is borrowing at 13%. So that's an issue in itself when government borrows, and especially shows desperation in borrowing. But under the circumstance we are now, the government needs funds, and those funds can only come from borrowing. Whether it is domestic borrowing or foreign borrowing is entirely a different thing. But the government needs funds where we are now.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Moses Tule. Let's get to our Lagos Network Center. Mr. Tilewa, it appears that this is not just an issue of spending our way out. In your closing thoughts, very briefly, what should we be doing now to see that in a very short while we're out of this?
Okay, thank you very much. Let me just make a correction to Mr. Tule. The issue of the JP Morgan, what I said was not that JP Morgan said you should devalue, but what JP Morgan said that you should move from your allocation mechanism to a more market-driven mechanism, which is the two-tier foreign exchange system you have now moved into. I'm not talking about devaluation or other devaluation. I'm talking about the allocation of the foreign exchange. That was their concern. And I will recall that the last time we were on this program that we spoke about foreign exchange, we were on the same position, but things have shifted since then. In closing, and I think what is important is that for me as a Nigerian, I have gone through, from the numbers that I see and the data that I see, and I think that's why I wanted to tell you that an 800% drop in your GDP in a year and a half is a major crisis. And what is important, and I think as Mr. Folusho Phillips has said, is for the government to articulate, apart from the central bank governor, apart from the finance minister, then the minister of industry, trade and investment, and the minister of budget and planning. Those four ministries, I think, need to sit down and come out in discussions with the vice president on a policy that Nigerians can buy into, that can be properly articulated, properly coordinated, and They will tell us what they want to do. So you will restore business confidence. The businesses will buy into it. You will restore investor confidence. All the investors, both local and foreign, will buy into it. And then you will also get the financial institutions and the financial markets to also buy into it. Then we all know that we have a long march, probably within the next 18 months, of moving in one direction in unison to be able to rescue this economy.
All right. Well, let's also get the closing thoughts of Mr. Felusha Phillips. Mr. Felusha Phillips, I would like you to respond to one of the points made by Dr. Tule here in the Abuja studios. He says that the CBN has, over the last couple of years, injected some 5 trillion naira into the economy. Now, the Minister of Finance says that we have to spend our way out of recession. But it would appear that what the fiscal authorities are doing will be only a fraction of the 5 trillion that the CBN has injected into the economy, and yet we are in a recession. What needs to be done?
Yes, I know. The central bank, yes, has been doing a lot in pushing money into the economy. I don't have the details as to which part of the economy we've been putting money into, whether that part is one that has a very strong, what I call reproductive system, whereby it's got a strong systemic impact on what is going on. I know there's a lot has been done in agriculture. I know a lot has been done in various areas that relate to agribusiness. But the point is, are these areas that help to drive a level of employment we require? Is it helping to reduce the amount of foreign exchange that we are bringing into the country? Because all these things have to be coordinated. Don't forget also that we tend in Nigeria, through just history, to have we don't have a very strong history of being a very productive economy. It seems like we're out of practice. We tend to forget now that barely 6-9 months ago, oil was a major part of our economy. All of a sudden, it's like the rug being pulled from under our feet. We don't have any oil, we don't have the revenue, and we are caught, literally sort of in a whirlpool of confusion, so to speak, as to what do we do next. We say we need to diversify the economy. To diversify the economy is something we must have been doing over the years. It's not done overnight. We say we need to trigger off the process to diversify the economy. We're sitting here having discussions about the difficulty of getting borrowing or getting credit or getting money that can help us to do these things at a rate that is affordable and that makes sense. When you continue to look at all these things, you find that at the end of the day, the private sector is really the solution. The CBN has put money in. Dr. Tuli mentioned about the development banks, and I know that the Bank of Industry, certainly I have commended them on the level of lending that they have done at that entrepreneurial level, that SME level. There are all kinds of initiatives that they're taking on board, trying to see how we can get things going. Like I said, we truly are out of practice as a country in having the capacity to produce, capacity to manufacture. The whole value chain of being a very productive economy is something that we're only just beginning to learn, and it's going to take time. And talking about time, also the policies we put in place. If we put a policy in place and expect to turn around in 2 or 3 or 4 months, then it's really not going to work out that way. We need a longer time to show that it's sustainable, it's not going to be changed, and therefore even foreign investors have the confidence that we have a much more stable system, a much more constant environment that allows them to come in and say they're very, very comfortable as to the things they need to do. For me, I just think the private sector needs to be looked at. If there's one way the government wants to measure its success, it's got to measure it with relation to the private sector. The more successful the private sector is, the more we can give government credit for doing the right thing.
All right. Let's just also get the closing thoughts of Abubakar Suleiman. Abubakar Suleiman, one of the guests, and in fact, we all have agreed that to an extent that we have structural challenges with the economy. Now, one of the symptoms of the structural challenge manifests itself in the fact that commercial banks appear more comfortable with short-term lending for trade and trading in the absence also of a trade policy. What do we need to do to rejig our structures?
Well, on the question of where the commercial banks are comfortable, I have to say that it is actually where Nigerians are comfortable. Because remember, the banks merely take depositors from Nigerians and they pass it on to people who need it. Over 90% of the deposits that Nigerians put in banks are less than 30 days in tenure. It would be rascally if banks were to take those kind of deposit and lend it much longer, because then you could have a liquidity crisis. So we need to get to a point where the savings culture in the country changes and people actually are saving for a longer period of time, not just through savings account, but through other products in the market. My contribution in terms of closing is to say that I want to move away from all the complex economics that we're talking about and to say that Nigeria's real problem, if there's one single problem today that is affecting all the policies, it is the availability of foreign exchange to meet demand. And to resolve that problem, there are a couple of ways. The first one is that the demand itself was too high. And it was too high because the exchange rate was very low. It meant that importing things was so much cheaper in Nigeria than it was in a whole lot of other places. And by central bank adopting a flexible rate, we have now reached a point where the rate has suddenly moderated demand. So a lot of the excess demand for foreign exchange is now self-moderating. People are changing their behavior and beginning to consume things that are made in Nigeria rather than insisting on importing things. That is an important first step. The second step is that we need to improve the flow of dollar as well. And to do that, the central bank has used monetary policy, try to attract portfolio investors by giving them the interest rate differential that they need to be able to come in. And that is commendable, but that is not going to solve all the problem. If the Ministry of Finance would like to see lower interest rate today, then they need to come on the table to help in solving the foreign exchange supply. So if, for instance, they are able to borrow successfully or they are able to divest of assets that are best managed by private sector and they raise foreign currency and that adds up to the reserves of the country, the central bank will have all the condition it needs to begin to look at lower interest rate. So let's all come to the table to solve the problem of FX supply, not just portfolio investors, not just the diaspora. Let us, again, attract Nigerians in diaspora to bring their own dollar flow into the country. Let us attract Nigerians in Nigeria whose dollars are outside to come back into the country by giving them assets that they consider valuable that the government doesn't necessarily need to be holding, or by actually going to borrow medium to short term. Once the dollars come in, the tools available to monetary authority will immediately expand and they can do so much more in terms of bringing down interest rate for the sake of the economy.
Much, gentlemen in Lagos. It's on that note we want to thank you very much for joining us on this discussion. Mr. Tilewa Adebajo, financial analyst, thank you very much for coming on the program. Folusho Phillips, former chairman of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, thank you very much. And also Abubakar Suleiman is executive director of finance and strategy, Sterling Bank. Gentlemen, we thank you very much. All right, and here in our Abuja studios, we were joined by Dr. Moses Tule. He is the CBN Director of Monetary Policy. Thank you very much for coming on Good Morning Nigeria.
It's a pleasure, thank you.
And Honorable Sadiq Ibrahim, thank you very much for joining us. He's a member of the House of Representatives and, of course, a former Speaker at Adamawa State House of Assembly. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
All right, that does it for our discussion segment. Let's take sports now from our sports desk.
Athletes from the participating state dressed in different colorful attires at a march-past parade to declare the games open at the sport arena of the University of Ilorin.
It is therefore my hope and aspiration